We're just a couple of months away from the premiere of Obi Wan Kenobi on Disney Plus. The hype machine for this is about to go into hyperspace in the next couple of weeks, but we're not willing to wait. So Kelly Knox, author of Be More Obi Wan, joins me today. And I promise there is a question I ask here that there was absolutely no way she was prepared to answer. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys record an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody listen to it.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast to name an official Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer and the director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story, it is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why I am honored to be joined this week by Kelly Knox. Kelly Knox writes features and DIYs for StarWars.com. She's the author of Vader Immortal, the digital art book, which is awesome. Marvel Monsters, Creatures of the Marvel Universe Explored is another one of her books. Her next book, Be More Obi Wan, says, hello there. I tried. I didn't do it as well this week. Anyway, in July, I asked Kelly if she can help us nail down what it is about Obi Wan Kenobi that makes him the gold standard of confidence and class in a galaxy far, far away.
I think for Obi-Wan in particular, he's, like you said, he's the gold standard, right? He is the Jedi, and I think it's because he puts all of his trust in the Force. Like, I think of all the Jedi, he is just, 100% devoted. Not that the others aren't, but for Obi-Wan, it directs everything that he does. And so I think that we get kind of like the ideal Jedi between Obi-Wan, and I always think Qui-Gon is another ideal Jedi for the same sort of reason. So
that's pretty cool. So you've got this book that's coming out, and it's got all these little bits of wisdom and quips and things like that. Tell me some of the fun moments in this book, the little ones that you found were your favorite to write. I'm curious to know what those are.
So I think I'm trying to think of how many things have been said about the book yet, so I don't spoil anything. But I know that I really wanted to talk about my favorite quote, which was from A New Hope, where he says, "Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?" Because that quote, for like my whole life, I've always remembered that quote, and so I wanted to make sure I got that one in there because it shows just a little bit of his wisdom and his sassiness, which I think is what everybody loves about Obi-Wan. Like, yes, he's the perfect Jedi, like we were saying before, but he's also like a little bit snarky and a little bit sarcastic sometimes. So I like that he's got this like really well-rounded personality, and I hope that was able to come through in the book, Be More Obi Wan. So
that's awesome. So you've said it a couple of times. He's the perfect Jedi, and you combine it with Qui-Gon, so you can talk a little bit about that too. But why is Obi Wan Kenobi the perfect Jedi?
Going back again to trusting in the Force and but not being so. He doesn't like strictly adhere to the guidelines. Like he's willing to break a little bit of the rules once in a while. I think the whole hearing about his history with Satine on Mandalore, like you start to get that idea a little bit that he, and in a way he reminds me a lot of the Jedi in the High Republic. I don't know if you read any of those books.
A little bit, yeah.
Where they give themselves permission to feel, which I think is very important. And so I think Obi-Wan's the same way, where he lets himself feel those emotions, but he's able to accept them and move on quickly, which is probably what Anakin's not really able to do, is accept and move on quickly from them.
He struggles to deal with his emotions, I would say.
Anakin does. He does, and I think Obi-Wan's kind of got it down, but we will see how he deals with, everything in the upcoming Obi Wan series. That's one thing I'm really looking forward to, is seeing. I think that will show us even more of like him learning how to deal with the failure of the Jedi and how he keeps trusting in the Force. Because when we see him in A New Hope, he is still obviously, following the Jedi ways, even if he's not quite a Jedi anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting because it seems like Obi-Wan doesn't transfer, I guess is the right word, transfer his ability to deal with emotions and deal with conflict and sort of allow things to flow out of him and go on to, he doesn't transfer that to Anakin, because we're joking a little bit about that. Anakin struggles with that. But, Qui-Gon has such an influence on the way that Obi-Wan perceives the Force. And you really get that when you read Master and Apprentice, and you start seeing some of that with that. Why do you think that there was such a disconnect between Obi-Wan Kenobi and the way he views the Force and dealing with attachment and conflict? Because he lost the love of his life, as Anakin was so fearful of doing, but their reactions were very different. Why do you think that transition was so difficult? It didn't transfer to Anakin as well.
I think for Obi-Wan, there's this quote in episode 2 where he just looks at Anakin and he says, "Patience, use the Force, think." And I think that's like Obi-Wan's plan for everything that he deals with, right? Like, we know he's patient. He waited 19, 20 years in the desert with, watching over Luke, and he stops to think, which I think Anakin obviously does not. It's never something I think Anakin will be accused of, is stopping to think. And so I think that it's a very short little sequence in Attack of the Clones, but I think that says a lot about how Obi-Wan approaches things.
So you mentioned the Kenobi series coming out in just a couple of months, less than 2 months now. What is your biggest wish item for the Kenobi series? What's if there's a dream moment or event in that, what are you hoping to see?
Oh, a dream moment in the Kenobi series. That's a question. I don't often
You try to avoid this thing that we do so much in Star Wars, which is speculating irresponsibly. We actually have a whole segment where we actually just call it predictions sure to go wrong, and we say we're going to speculate irresponsibly, and that's how we process it, because we know nothing that we're going to predict is going to happen. Right. So here's your speculate irresponsibly, predictions sure to go wrong moment for Kenobi. What do you want?
I want him to maybe think about Satine, or even just say her name. I think that would be amazing to kind of bring her in. But I think beyond that, I just love experiencing this, the story, the way they tell it. So I never tend to speculate on that stuff.
Well, that's cool.
But I would, if he says her name or something, I think the entire internet would freak out. But personally, I would freak out.
That's cool. So obviously the big time Clone Wars fan on your end. Your book uses examples of Obi Wan Kenobi from all the different eras, from the prequels, from the original trilogy, and of course from the Clone Wars. Is the Clone Wars Kenobi your favorite, or which version of Kenobi is your favorite, and why? Oh,
that's a great question. I would say probably episode 3 Kenobi. He spends a lot of time in episode 2 just giving Anakin what did you just say, Lux? I feel like in episode 2 he's just very reactive to a lot of stuff. And so I think in episode 3 I feel like both he and Anakin, they're at a great point in their in their partnership and their relationship. And so I really like seeing their back and forth in episode 3. So I think together with Anakin, I like him. I like that version of Obi-Wan the best in episode 3. He is pretty much at the height of his snarkiness in the Clone Wars, so that's always pretty fun. Yeah. But yeah, so I would say probably episode 3 Obi-Wan. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome. I remember and I've talked about this on the show a number of times, so our listeners know this, but my favorite Star Wars novel of all time is the Revenge of the Sith novelization. And I remember actually them selling those before the movies came out. You could get those on Tuesday before the movie came out, and reading the entire novelization before the movie came out, because I don't know what I was thinking. But anyway, I feel like the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan is so powerful in that novel that it changed the way I viewed that film going into it, and it really is that how much they talk about brothers. What do you think about that relationship in Episode 3 between Anakin and Obi-Wan?
So I haven't read that novelization, but I've heard so many good things, and the excerpts that I see, they kind of read like poetry almost.
It's beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so just going off Episode 3 as the film, I think there's a lot said just in a glance, and then I've seen like deleted scenes where they have like their own sign language and stuff. That's always like that. All just points to how comfortable they are now working with each other compared to especially Episode 2, where all Anakin does is argue. And I was going to say, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that explored more in Brotherhood, the novel coming up that focuses on the two of them. So. I think there's a lot to show there, but I think there's a lot that they say without saying in Episode 3, just the way they look at each other and the way they interact with each other that makes it so good.
It's so cool. That the idea of them being brothers really carries through in that entire film, and it's so powerful that Mustafar, when he says that line, you were my brother, and everything is powerful. So Obi-Wan has dealt with tragedy and he's dealt with conflict throughout his entire storyline, all the way from when we see him first in Episode 1, and then of course with Satine and Anakin and everything happening on that. So he knows how to deal with difficult situations. So this is your opportunity to channel your inner Obi-Wan Kenobi and apply some of this wisdom that you've put in this book to a current, very popular topic. You are not prepared for this question. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's put it to the test. Here's the scenario. We're in a weird parallel universe where Obi-Wan Kenobi is actually in attendance at Sunday evening's Oscars. And afterward, at the after party, he has a chance to talk with both Will Smith and with Chris Rock. What advice would Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, the gold standard, give to both of these men in this moment?
Oh my goodness. That is a difficult question. Give me a moment. I think, he would certainly encourage some meditation, I think, on both their parts on maybe what happened. Both how their strong emotions probably both led them to that moment. And I think Obi-Wan, what would he say? Because you can see the passion there from Will Smith that Anakin often struggled with.
Right.
So I think he might, recognize that a little bit and just encourage them both probably to do the same thing I was talking about earlier, patience, think, stop and reflect. It reminds me a little bit, I don't want to say that, when my daughter does something that she does without thinking, when she makes a mistake, I always just say, accept what you did and find out how to fix it and move forward. And I feel like Obi-Wan might kind of say the same thing, but a little more wisely.
Well, it's different when you're talking to your child versus talking to another adult. So,
but yeah. So yeah, I think Obi-Wan would try to focus maybe on not dwelling on the past and moving forward and, taking a look at yourself and meditating. So.
Yeah. Both of those guys could use some restraint and some patience and becoming a little bit more one with the Force in that moment, some Qui-Gon moments. I could see some of that, exactly.
I guess we could all use some quiet moments of self-reflection.
Absolutely. And I think that social media could use that, not in general, just in general, but specifically in regards to both Will Smith and Chris Rock in this event on the Oscars. But that's another conversation altogether. Kelly nails it when she said that Obi Wan Kenobi would tell Will Smith and Chris Rock to have patience and to think and to stop and reflect. This advice is good for more than just celebrities caught up in a public feud. This is something that each of us would do well to consider, especially Star Wars fans getting ready to hit send on a hot take tweet. We'll get back to our conversation with Kelly in just a minute, but before we do that, here's your chance to change the story that you're telling yourself by maybe taking some time to have some patience and to think and to stop and reflect and join the fellowship that we've initiated around the Hero's Journal. We've begun a quest to better ourselves and our lives through this amazing tool that uses the power of stories and scientifically proven productivity techniques to help fans like us take control of the story that we tell ourselves. Remember, changing our story takes small changes over periods of time. It's not giant moments of inspiration. It's those small, consistent actions. And the Hero's Journal provides a fun and powerful way to take those steps. You can join our fellowship for free. Just head over to theheroesjournal.co/pages/Tatooine Sons. The link is in the show notes as well. You can download a digital version of the first act of the Hero's Journal and begin your quest today. And if you haven't checked out our Patreon page, I want to make sure that you head over there after listening to this episode, because you may not be aware of this, but we actually regularly post public content on our page. And that means you don't have to be a Patreon supporter to read it. One of the things that gets put on that page just about every day is a new Dad Moments series. And these articles take ideas from the stories that we love, and it looks at those stories from the greater story perspective that you've come to know us for. Please check it out. Now, one big reason I wanted to have Kelly on the show was because she's on her own hero's journey to use the Star Wars stories that we love to help teach important life lessons. So in addition to Be More Kenobi, Kelly has also written Be More Lando, Be More Boba, and Be More Vader. And she's obviously got a lot of Star Wars love. So I asked Kelly who her favorite characters from each era of Star Wars are.
So my number one favorite is Darth Vader, which used to not always be the case. It used to be.
Why did that change?
I want to say because of the prequels and the Clone Wars and seeing how Anakin made that journey, and plus Darth Vader is just such a wonderful diva in so many things, especially like Star Wars Rebels, where I think he's at the peak of his divaness. But I really
flying
love
in
Vader.
on top of us.
It's like peak Darth Vader, and I love it. So I would say Darth Vader from the original trilogy, Obi-Wan in the prequels, seeing his journey as a Jedi from episode 1, which I really love, and all the way through episode 3. From the sequels, probably Rey.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then Rebels. I don't know if Darth Vader counts there too, but I also really love Kanan.
Oh yeah.
So I guess a bunch of Jedi is my answer.
You like the Jedi? That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. And a little Sith when he's the bad guy, in Darth Vader. So that's pretty cool. What about the Clone Wars? Is it Kenobi in that?
Yeah, definitely Kenobi still. Of course, I love Ahsoka, but like I said, Obi-Wan's at the height of his sassiness and his wisdom. So I feel like he's a great character in the Clone Wars too. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Of all of the things coming out, let's put Kenobi aside because we've already talked a little bit about that. We've got Ahsoka, we've got Andor, and we've got, let's see, what else do we have? We have the Acolyte coming. We don't know much about that one, but of the things that have been confirmed to be coming in the future, what are you most excited about when it comes to Star Wars, and why?
Obi Wan Kenobi aside, I would probably say Andor, because I really love Diego Luna's Cassian Andor, and I think there's a lot to explain there that they hinted at in Rogue One with the horrible things he had to do in the name of, the rebellion. And I think maybe the series can go into that a little more, and that'll make it pretty different than a lot of what we've seen. So I'm pretty excited for Andor. What else is coming up? In the real world, I'm really looking forward to Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Now you've been to Celebration before?
I've been to one.
Which one did you go to? Okay, 2019.
Yeah, 2019. And so that was fun. And so I'm really looking forward to going back to that this year.
That's cool. It's so much. That's what started it for us. I mean, we were Star Wars fans. Sam and Nathan, my sons, and I were obviously huge Star Wars fans, but we'd never been to a con. We'd never been to anything before 2017 Celebration Orlando. And I was working in California, and my kids and my wife were in Colorado, and we weren't seeing. I was away from them for about 6 months. And we met up at Celebration Orlando, and it was the most amazing. I was downplaying it the whole time. We were like walking to it, from our hotel, going, it can't be as big as we think it's going to be. It's not going to be as awesome as we think it's going to be. And it was like so much better than we could have even dreamed. And then we were standing there in line, and I remember my oldest, who was 16 at the time, looking at me and saying, "Dad, we found our people." Yes, that's what it was like. So it's very cool. It was cool.
I've been to I live in Seattle, so I've been to Emerald City Comic-Con and PAX, and I went to San Diego Comic-Con a long time ago, and I was getting ready for Celebration, and I was like, it's just another convention, it can't be all that different. And I got there, and I was like, this is so much different. Like you said, there's you can't really prepare yourself for how much wonderful Star Wars things are there, people. It's its own unique show, and I really love it. So I'm really excited to go back.
It's definitely an experience that you have to try to get to every chance you can when the opportunity is there. We like to ask this question kind of as a closing with every one of our Star Wars guests, that people that love Star Wars as much as we do. And so for you, how does Star Wars inspire hope?
That's a great question. And I think that's probably at the heart of why I enjoy Star Wars so much is on a basic level, you feel like the good guys are going to win, right? You're like, these good guys are always going to win. They're going to go through, in Obi-Wan's case, a lot of terrible, hard things. But in the end, what they're fighting for is worth it, and they're going to win. And so I think that's why I've loved Star Wars since I was a kid, is that that no matter what they're going through, it's in the end, it's all going to work out. And so in real life, we don't get that guarantee. So I think sometimes it's nice to pretend that everything's going to work out. But in Star Wars, that they might go through a lot to get there, but eventually, the good guys are going to win.
A powerful thing about the stories that Star Wars tells is the idea that as bad as things get, we know the good guys will somehow win in the end. There is so much hope in this belief. And because we believe that these stories teach us about a greater story, it's the belief that good will win out in the end that gives us hope in the real world as well. I want to thank Kelly for joining me this week on Tatooine Sons. You can follow Kelly on Twitter at Kelly_Knox. Those are both with K's, to talk Star Wars, pop culture, and for honestly some of the best dad jokes in the galaxy. You will crack up when you read those. And thank you for listening to Tatooine Sons, of Pop Culture Podcast. If you enjoyed this interview, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button on your app so that you can get every episode the moment it drops. Our next episode is going to release this coming Tuesday. We are going to give our first reaction to Moon Knight. We're going to talk about Morbius, which we are going into seeing with a little bit of trepidation right now. And then I promise we're going to find some more Star Wars content to discuss as we wait for Kenobi to come out. Make sure you follow the show so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, follow Tatooine Sons on Facebook and Twitter. Share this episode with somebody else. It's the best way that you can help the show grow. I think that is going to do it for today. There's only one thing left to say.
May the Force be with you, always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Joy, please.
Yep, yep.